Okay, so um, we are still going to stick with slope-intercept form, so what we left off with, um, except now we're going to really focus in on graphing it. This is a big portion of algebra as far as, working with slope-intercept form, graphing those out. Like I said, if you can find some graph paper somewhere, if you're going out, or if you just want to print it, you probably type in printable graph paper, and that way it'd be a lot easier for you to use. If you can't, if you don't have access to that, you can. I'm hand drawing them. I don't have a graph board, so you can do that. But we are going to be graphing these problems that we've been doing. So we're still working with what we've been doing, but now we're going to put them on a graph. So first thing is, now we're working with slope-intercept form, okay? So we have that slope-intercept form, which was y equals mx plus b. Now, the first thing that we talked about as far as these specific letters, m is slope. It's always the slope. Now, a lot of times it's a fraction. And this is the y-intercept. Y-intercept means that is where you cross the y-axis. And remember, the y-axis is the one that goes up and down. This is the x-axis. So this y-intercept, whatever this number is, and it can actually be a fraction, except we won't be doing ones that have this as a fraction. But what that means is where this line crosses the y-axis. So if it's a line that goes like this, maybe it crosses up here. Maybe it's a line that goes down and crosses down here. Maybe it's a line that goes up and crosses here. It's where it crosses the y-axis. So that's going to give us a starting point is what that's going to do. Like if I start here and then work my slope, then I can do it. Or if I start down here, it depends on where I have to start. That's why a lot of times, now this can be a fraction, but that's very hard to do on a graph. You have to get in between the lines. And we're not going to do that. We're going to always have this usually be a whole number. So now it can be positive or negative depending on what this sign is. So, that tells me if I'm up here or down here. So that's going to give me a starting point. And then we'll do once we start, then we work with our slope. But let's do a couple where we're just putting where the y-intercept is. So this one right here, y equals 2x plus 1. Okay, now what that's telling me is the slope and where it crosses the y-axis, this 1. So that's where we're going to start on this one. Okay, we're going to start at positive 1 on the y-axis. That's my first point, is positive 1. Let's say we did one that was 2y equals 3x minus 4. Well, remember, we got to have it in y equals mx plus b, even to graph it. So I cannot leave it like that. I have to divide both sides by 2. And so I'm going to get y equals 3 over 2x. Remember, a lot of times this is going to be a fraction, so 3 over 2 is my slope. But then this is going to be negative 2, which means my starting point would be here at negative 2 for this one. Okay, so whether it be written out in y equals mx plus b, or you have to do the math first, you need to do that so that you can find where to start at. Whether we're going to start this one at 1 and then we'll do this one next where we start at negative 2. I'll leave it up there. Now, the slope is a little trickier. Okay, so what's nice about the y-intercept is you just have to identify it. You just have to know it's right there, find it, boom, it's good to go. Slope, okay, yes, you identify it. So this one is 2, okay. Actually, let me erase this so we got a little more room and it's not confusing. I'll come back to that one though. But our slope is 2, but that means two things, okay. It's going to tell me the point that I can put out here or the point that I can put on the other side of the starting point. And how that works is if it's a positive slope. So think about positive, okay? So first off, let's identify this as a fraction. So 2, if we want to make a whole number a fraction, we put it over 1. So here's my slope. Okay, slope is the m. It's the 2 over 1 in this case. It's a whole number, so it's 2 over 1. Well, remember, that's rise over run. And this is a positive slope. Okay, I put Put it out there because in this case it has a plus sign, or a plus sign, sorry. It's a positive slope, which means I go 2 over 1, which if I'm plotting this out, this is what you have to do with slope. You have to go rise over to run, so I have to go 1 over, that's the run, 1 over positive, 2 up. So I went positive 1, I went positive 2. So my next point is here. Okay, and I could put another point, I could keep going with that. From here, go 1 over, 2 up, 1 over, 2 up. I could keep going. The only problem with that is we could keep putting points, but we need some points that go down this way as well, so that we can see, especially if we're trying to find where the x-intercept is, where does it hit the x-axis. So a positive slope gives you, two positive numbers, you go positive, you keep going positive. Well, how do we find those negative ones? Well, what we have to do is we have to rethink this as far as not only does that come out as positive 2, but what if I make both of those numbers negative? What is a negative 2 divided by a negative 1? And I'm asking a camera. I know that's hard, but if you think to yourself, hey, he's asking me, I'm watching the camera. If you do that, it comes out also as positive 2. So a positive slope can both numbers be positive and both numbers be negative. And so this is still positive 2 though. Okay? But now to graph this, I can now find where these points go. Okay? It's still rise over run though. That never changes. It's always rise over run. So that now means I'm going to go back to my starting point, my y-intercept, and I'm going to go 1 over negative and then go down 2. So down 1, down 2, that point is there. And see, you can see it's still in a straight line. Okay? And I could keep going, 1 over negative 2 down, 1 over negative 2 down, and it would stay on that line. Okay? So but what I want you to do is always start with the y-intercept, so find that point first, and then find it where it goes this way and find it where it goes this way. So give me a point this way, a point that way. Okay, so that's going to take a little practice. Let's go back to let's go back to this one and do it as well so that you can see it. And let me just start over. Now, obviously, if you struggle with graphs, you need to go, we teach that in kind of math lab pre-algebra. You may need to go back and watch some videos, just basic graphing, if you need to know where like 1, 0 is or 2. Now, you don't, for the main thing really is for these, you just got to know where to start on the y-axis and then count with slope. So really you don't have to necessarily know where the points are, but it does help, okay? So let's do this one again. This was the one that I started out, 2y equals 3x minus 4. So let's divide by 2. We still got to do that. This is where we got 3 over 2x minus 2. This becomes negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. So what that means to graph this now, okay, I'm going to start at negative 2. That's my starting point. Okay. And so I started at negative 2. Now just know if you hand draw this like mine, your line is going to be a little crooked because you didn't necessarily perfectly space everything, so be aware of that. If you do it on graph paper, it'll always be like perfect. But I started at negative 2, that's the first thing, okay? And then my slope is a positive 3/2. So let's do the positive first. So that's rise over run, so that means I run 2, 1, 2, okay? And I'm going in the positive direction, positive 2. And then from there, I'm going to go up 3. So I went over 2, and I'm going to go up 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and there's my point there. Okay? Now, that means I went over 2, up 3. And I could keep doing that. Over 2, up 3, up 3. And it would keep going in that line. But now I need to do this, negative 3 over negative 2. That is also positive 3/2. See, if you divide a negative by a negative, it becomes positive. That means from this start, you've got to go back to your y-intercept, go 2 over negative, and 3 down. Okay, so that follows on that straight line. Okay, 2 over negative, 3 down. Okay, so you see that you've got this, first find out what your y starting point, do your positive slope, do your negative slope, okay? In those cases. Now, let's say I do one that, let's say I'm just going to make one up. I'm going to just keep it y equals, I'm not going to make it divide by anything. Let's say I've got negative, let's start with a negative 2/3. So this whole thing is negative 2/3 x plus 1, okay? So here's my slope-intercept. It's already in slope-intercept, y equals mx plus b. And so that means I'm going to start at 1. I'm going to start here at 1. Okay? So that's the first thing to do is find your starting point. Find your y-intercept. And if it's already in y, or you don't have to divide, it's just right there. And you start there on the y-axis. The difference is, as you can see, it's a negative slope. Now, the other two we did were positive slopes. That meant the line went up. Okay, it went up positive, and we had to make, positive over positive, negative over negative. With it being a negative slope, okay, and the negatives out front, see, that's where I had us do that earlier, where I had this, let's say we did our math, and I had us move it out front. Okay, so does it go with a 2 or 3? Well, that's what you have to do, one of each. So my first slope, I'm going to put the negative on top. Now, if you think about it, a negative 2 divided by a positive 3 comes out to negative 2/3. So let's do it as this way. That means that I run positive 3s, because that's a positive. So I go 1, 2, 3. But then, because this is negative, I go down to 1, 2. Okay? So I went positive 3 down to, from my starting point, I went 1, 2, 3. I ran 3. It's always rise over run. And then I went down 2. Okay, so now my line is going down, which it should. It's a negative slope, so it should go down. But now I need to find the point out here. Okay, right? I need to find the other point on the other side of it. Well, let's switch places with that negative. Oh, not the number, sorry. With the negative. Meaning the number stayed the same, but now I moved the negative down here. That is also negative 2/3, because it's a positive divided by a negative. So that means that I'm going to start back at my starting point. I'm going to run 3, but I'm going to go up 2. So I went negative 3 run, and I went up 2. That falls in line with my line. Okay? All right? So that gives you, what happens when there's a negative slope and a positive slope. Let's do one more of those. Okay, so let me see if I can do this real quick. I'm going to make this one up. Let's go 2y equals negative. Actually, sorry if you started it. Let's do one like this and really get into it. Let's go negative 4x. Oh no, my goodness. Edit, delete. I can't edit, but 4x plus 2y equals, let's go ahead and make this negative 2, okay? So 4x plus 2y. Now, what I did here, I did a couple things. I put the x out over on this side, and you're going to see too, we're going to have some negative numbers, but we've done these. This is where we had it cut in line. So let's get it in y equals mx plus b form. We have to do that first before we can graph it. So this is the one that I had us move it and have us cut in line. So now this becomes 2y equals negative 4x minus 2. Okay? So I just had it cut in line. And then you got to divide by 2. So you're going to get y is negative 2. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2x. And negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. Okay? So now we're in y equals mx plus b form. So let's rewrite this so we can graph it. Okay, y is negative 2x minus 1. Okay, so what that means is we're going to start at negative 1. Ooh, I really put a gap there. It's okay. So we're going to start at, let's clean that up a little bit. So I'm going to start at negative 1. Okay, that's my y-intercept. And my slope is, remember, we gotta make this a fraction, so it's negative 2 over 1. It's negative 2 over 1. That's what my fraction is. Well, that can be interpreted two different ways. It can be interpreted like this. So just make the 1 negative. So from this means I'm going to go 1 over negative, 2 up. So that puts me there. My line's going down, which always check that. If your slope's negative, it should go down. If your slope's positive, it should go up. So we got the slope going down. That was going this way. Now let's switch places and put the negative on top. Okay? That means we got to start back at my starting point. This time I'm going to go 1 positive, but I'm going to go 2 down. So that point is here. It falls on my line if I had, gapped it right. And so that's how you do those 2 points there. Okay? Go back, kind of watch those. Get some practice with that. And that will be that. Now what I'm going to do is let me put up some problems of that. And then, actually, no, I'm going to wait. I'm going to put those problems with the other ones, okay? The other thing that we need to, so that would be like the first day of material, okay? Second day of material is, okay, so get some practice, spend some time on that. The other thing we need to look at is, okay, we know how to identify the y-intercept, where it crosses the y-axis. But also we need to know where the x-intercept is. Where does it cross the x-axis? And sometimes if you graph it and go long enough, you can eventually find it. You can find where it crosses that x-axis. But sometimes that takes a while because you may be way down here and have to do lots of slopes to get there. And then sometimes too, this is going to end up being a fraction a lot of times, even where it crosses the x-axis. They focus more on this being a whole number. This sometimes is a fraction. Well, there's a way to do this without graphing, and that's what we're going to do. We're actually going to find these things by not graphing at this point. So the y-intercept we already know how to find. Okay, the y-intercept is 6. Okay, now the key to that is to know that's an actual point on the graph, right? It's up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That point on the graph is 0, 6. Meaning I put that, it's a y-intercept, but that has a point, and it's where the x is 0, then y is 6. Now, it's easy to identify that because it's given to you. That's the y-intercept. But if you think about it, if I put in 0 for x, okay, so if I put in 0 for x, 3 times 0 is 0, that disappears, y is 6. So if you put in 0 for x in this equation, you get out 6 for y. That's what that point means. Okay, because remember, this is always about input output. So if I put in 0 for x, 3 times 0 is 0, that, let's look at, this is what I mean. If I put in 0 for x, those cancel out. 3 times 0 is 0, and 6 becomes my y. Okay, so the y-intercept is 6, but it's an actual point, so it's 0, 6. It means you put the 6 where the y would go. Well, the x-intercept on this same problem is just as easy. You just have to do some math. Meaning instead of putting in 0 for x and finding the y, we're going to put in 0 for y and solve for x. Okay, so we plugged in a 0 for y and we're going to solve for x. And you say, well, how do you do that? Well, we're just going to isolate x. So that means we're going to move 6 over here. Okay, and now the last thing to isolate it is divide by 3. So that we get negative 2 is my x. Okay, so that point is then when I plug in 0 for y, I get negative 2 for x. Okay, and see, if I graph this, if I went through the whole thing of graphing this and did my slope and start going down, 1, 3, 1, 3, eventually out here, I'm going to hit the x-axis at negative 2, 0. Okay, if I draw my graph really well, I would have hit it negative 2, 0. Okay, so, and I know that was quite a bit there right at the start of it, but let's do some of them and you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so we're going to find the y-intercept and the x-intercept on all of these equations. Okay, 2y equals 4x minus 8. Well, let's find the y-intercept first. Well, we gotta get rid of the 2. That's not changed from any of our work. Okay, so my y-intercept is negative 4 out here on the y, so put in a 0 there. 0, negative 4. Okay, that's all you have to do. Get it down to the y equals mx plus b, identify it, that's where it's at. Okay, for the x-intercept, we're going to start back over. Okay, now you can do this, I would actually leave it like this. Okay, so you've got this. So we're going to, because this is the same value as this. Okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to plug in 0 for y and solve for x. So I just plugged in 0 for y and I'm going to solve for x to get my x-intercept. So let's move the 4 over. So 4 equals 2x. And then I'm going to divide by 2. So my x is 2 when my y is 0. Okay? Let's do another one. Let's say I have 3x plus 3y equals 9. Okay, so I've got to get in y equals mx plus b form to find my y-intercept. Okay, got to get it in that form first. So this is the one where you move it. Okay, have it cut in line. Then divide by 3 so that you can have this be y equals negative x. That's negative 1x plus 3. So my y-intercept is 3. So when x is 0, the y is 3. But to find the x-intercept, now you plug in 0 for y and solve for x. Okay, so you plugged in 0 for y, you're going to solve for x. So that means you move your 3. Okay, that's a negative x. And then, so this is where you're at. Okay, and the last thing you need to do is it's not negative x. You gotta change that to a positive, which means you change that to a positive. So that means when your y is 0, then your x is 3. Okay, so that's your y-intercept, x-intercept. Okay, lots of stuff, but you know the first part is what we've been doing for a while. So find it, and then the only other thing is to solve for the x-intercept, to start plugging in 0 for y, and solving for x. Okay, and I'll have us check our answers. We'll spend a little more time on this on Thursday. I just wanted to, do that. So let me put the assignments up. So on these, I want you to graph. Okay, y equals 3x minus 2. 4y equals negative 8x plus 12. 5x plus 2y equals negative 4. And negative 3x minus y is negative 3. So these you're graphing. Okay, so you're going to have to put them in y equals mx plus b form though. And then these, I want you to find the y-intercept and the x-intercept. Don't have to graph them. You just need to find what the x-intercept is, or the y-intercept and the x-intercept. So that is going to be y equals 5x minus 5. 2y equals 4x plus 8. X plus y equals 8. And 8x plus 2y equals 8. Now remember, like this one's already in y equals mx plus b. So your y-intercept is given to you. You can already just plug that in, and then go from there. These you got to rework to put in y equals mx plus b form. Okay, so don't forget to do that first. All right. Okay, so that's both days of material there. So we'll let you start on that.